Tonight, Toronto's police chief defends his budget.
It would be naive to reduce police officers.
Outrage over police brutality and racism in the United States shines new light on how much Toronto spends on policing. Plus,
I had my Bose speakers on and I heard every word she said.
A long-term care executive is turfed after she was caught mocking families after an online call. And the NBA takes a big step towards restarting its season. We'll tell you where and when you could see the Raptors back in action. Good evening, I'm Mike Wise. Toronto's police chief is addressing calls to cut the police budget. The idea of defunding police has gained traction in the wake of George Floyd's death. Los Angeles announced cuts, but Chief Saunders says a lot needs to happen here in Toronto before he can talk about reducing the budget. Talia Ricci reports.
It's an idea many are talking about in Toronto: defund the police. A letter circulating online is calling on elected officials to stop increasing the Toronto Police Service's budget. Instead, they want cuts, with the money saved put into expanding community-led health and safety initiatives. Louis March runs a group with a goal to end gun violence in the city.
We know it needs to be done, but the fact of the matter is, the police budget continues to increase and investment in community continues to decline.
Currently, the Toronto police budget is over $1 billion. March says no doubt more funding for community programs would have a positive impact.
When it comes to policing, we're not looking for quantity of policing, we're looking for quality of policing.
Today, Toronto Police Chief Mark Saunders said reducing the number of officers would be, quote, naive, noting Toronto's gun violence.
Right now, we've got a responsibility, we've got a role, and that role is to keep the community safe. Now we need other agencies to help offload those responsibilities of helping the at-risk, of helping the high-risk. Then we can start talking about the reduction.
Saunders admits there has to be bigger change to end anti-Black racism. He says the video of George Floyd's death gave him a horrible feeling in his stomach.
It still bothers me. I mean, I have kids. You know, I'm running the organization as chief. That is not what law enforcement is trained to do.
And he says he understands the passion and anger fueling the protests. As some are planned in Toronto in the coming days, he says police have a plan, but he expects things to remain peaceful. Still, many businesses are boarded up. March says he'll believe things will change when he sees it.
We've seen these promises made before, but we're still in the same predicament where the trust between community and police is not where it needs to be.
Talia Ricci, CBC News, Toronto.
Saunders also addressed the police method of knee-on neck restraint, which of course has come under fire following the death of George Floyd in Minneapolis.
There have been recent discussions on the use of knee-to-neck restraint techniques, and I want to be clear that this organization does not, and I repeat, does not train to this.
But that doesn't appear to be the case in Durham region. This video from last year has resurfaced, showing Durham police officers subduing a Black teenager. A spokesperson in Durham says it is a tactic that may be used. Now, in response to George Floyd's death, Durham's police chief says it is listening to voices in the community, continuously improving training and education. And this was seen in Burlington this afternoon. Over 5,000 people attended a peaceful protest there in solidarity with Black Lives Matter. Attendees marched for 4 kilometers to Burlington City Hall, where they held a rally for peace. It was a peaceful rally. Halton police were there to monitor things. And Premier Ford has come under fire this week for flip-flopping on whether systemic racism exists in Canada and Ontario. Well, today the government announced a youth council that will focus on equality, and that is drawing fire from the opposition. Lisa Shing looks at the government's record on anti-racism.
Yeah, I'm going up to yonder.
As mourners attend a memorial for George Floyd, an acknowledgement from the Ford government.
This pain has not gone unnoticed.
Their response, a new council focusing on education, skills training, and employment for youth.
We were all dealing with a pandemic, which brings its health issues. Then you had on the economic issues on top of that. You add on the fact that we have constraints, rightfully so, on how our communities can gather and support one another. And then you add, then the fourth layer on top of all of that has been this weight of racism.
But Liberal MPP Michael Coteau points out.
The Premier's Youth Opportunities Advisory Council existed 2 years ago, and Doug Ford got rid of that. So it's just a bit disappointing.
Thanks, Andrew.
Coteau was also the previous government's minister in charge of anti-racism. That position was eliminated when the PCs took power.
They don't think it's important enough to have its own portfolio.
After a week where the Premier backtracked on whether there's systemic racism in Canada, critics say his government's track record falls flat.
They have not really lived up to its promise and has not given anti-racism the priority that it's due.
Avi Go helped shape the previous government's legislation on anti-racism that passed in 2017. She points to several decisions the PCs have made. The Anti-Racism Directorate was established 4 years ago to help eliminate racism from government policymaking, decisions, and programs. Now, when the Ford government came into power, it eliminated 4 subcommittees associated with that directorate.
We're continuing to support the Anti-Racism Directorate, and at the same time, we're continuing to build on our Black Youth Action Plan.
Go says if the government were truly committed, it would start by mandating all ministries and departments collect race-based data to better inform policymaking. Lisa Shing, CBC News, Toronto.
Well, it may feel like patio season outside, but it sure doesn't look like patio season. They've been sitting empty with restaurants closed during the pandemic, but not for long. The City of Toronto will soon allow restaurants and bars to expand their patios, increasing the number of tables outside once they get the green light to reopen. Ali Chasson has that story.
This is the patio here. As you can see, it's quite wide.
The folks at Great Lakes Brewery have been waiting for this day. They've already been mapping it out.
Our capacity is about 40 to 50, so I would think just given sort of the rough guide of the percentage that we're allowed, we're looking at about 15 to 20 people, but at least we'll have some people able to enjoy a pint. Obviously, we'll have to take a lot of precautions with sanitizer and gloves and taking money and tapping instead of cash. The bar and hospitality industry is probably one of the hardest hit through COVID, with the largest amount of layoffs and bar closures, let alone all the breweries that were sitting on inventory and all the beer that's got to get disposed of, unfortunately.
Today, some good news. The city announced patio season will resume. When exactly?
It isn't clear at this moment exactly when that will happen. I'm hearing reports that it will be part of the stage 2 reopening, but we have no confirmation of that. But we want to make sure the city and that the individual bar and restaurant owners are ready to proceed.
Dubbed Cafe TO, businesses will be able to expand or build new patios onto sidewalks, streets, parking lots to allow for physical distancing. And they're waiving the permit fees, even though the city could use the money right now.
You know, we have financial problems, but in the end, I think the city overall will be much healthier in the broadest sense if we allow these businesses to get back on their feet and to stay on their feet.
There's still a lot of the patio season for these restaurants and bars to capitalize on.
Yeah, it'll take a little getting used to, just as walking onto the street, separating when you meet somebody on the street, took a little getting used to, but we got there.
With the patio mapped out at Great Lakes Brewery, all that's left is training staff for this new era of service with sanitizing and spacing. But they're just excited to be back at work.
Cheers.
To patio season. Ali Chiasson, CBC News, Toronto.
And you can soon rent out that spare basement or spare bedroom in the basement that's been sitting empty. The province announcing today that short-term rentals will be allowed to resume operations tomorrow. The move applies to lodges, cabins, cottages, homes, condominiums, and bed and breakfasts. Owners and guests are expected to continue to practice physical distancing, wear a face covering when in close quarters, and of course, wash their hands frequently. A Toronto judge says a former bar owner and his manager who were convicted in a violent sexual assault saw women as, quote, disposable. Justice Michael Dambrot releasing his full written reasons for sentencing Gavin McMillan and Enzo De Jesus Carrasco to 9 years behind bars in connection with the 2016 attack at the College Street bar. That assault was captured on video. Justice Dambrot said, while the two men may have presented themselves as respectful in most circumstances, their actions showed a deep sense of entitlement with regard to women and profound disrespect for the complainant. McMillan and Carrasco were each found guilty last November of gang sexual assault and administering a stupefying drug. But one good thing that may come out of the COVID-19 pandemic, some sweeping changes to Ontario's court system. Since most cases are delayed, officials are using this break to get rid of things like fax machines and some paper records, and to bring in some long overdue technological changes. John Lancaster has the details.
As the signs outside Toronto's Old City Hall note, the court system has essentially been shuttered except for urgent matters. It's due to COVID-19. But the pandemic is also what's going to usher in what Ontario's Attorney General says will be new, permanent technological upgrades.
When COVID hit, it really made the state of the justice system explode, because the paper-based system that we've all lived with for so long was just not sustainable.
Some traditional court hearings will be replaced by virtual hearings, especially bail applications, setting dates for trials, and court files will be digitized. John Struthers, president of the Criminal Lawyers Association, says public access will be maintained.
So when it's a video, most of the platforms have the ability to join up and to watch without participating. I've even done a case on the telephone where members of the family and members of the press participated on a conference call. We understand they have to be public courts, and they will be.
So far, Downey says 300 courtrooms have been fitted so judges can hold virtual hearings, and 149 traditional courtrooms with plexiglass shields and distancing markers are set to open up July 6th.
We have the technology out there. We've spent $1.3 million on getting laptops, digital recording devices, VPNs, allowing trials by Zoom. This stuff is happening now. So it's a matter of expanding.
Much of this change hastened by COVID-19. John Lancaster, CBC News, Toronto.
Gwen closed her laptop and assumed that would disconnect the call.
The head of a long-term care home is out of a job tonight after she was caught making some controversial comments about her patients' families. Now the province has moved to take control of that home hit hard by COVID-19. That story coming up after the break. The executive vice president of operations for a major long-term care home operator in Ontario is out of her job tonight. It comes after her comments were recorded seemingly accidentally following a virtual town hall she chaired with families last night. Chris Glover is at Woodbridge Vista Care Community with the exclusive details.
Properly trained and qualified personnel.
Let me take your question now. I'm going to talk to you about staffing and I'll give you...
Joanne Dykeman, Vice President of Operations with Sienna Senior Living, fielding concerns last night from families of people living in Woodbridge Vista Care Community. Right after this virtual town hall, Dykeman left her mic on.
Oh, God. Yeah. I think I did okay.
Joanne closed her laptop and assumed that would disconnect the call, which it didn't. I had my Bose speakers on and I heard every word she said.
Nick Popolo's mom, living in the home, tested positive for COVID-19. He heard the powerful executive mocking families, in addition to implying families were hoping to score money with a lawsuit. Sienna is already the subject of lawsuits for its handling of the COVID crisis from families at a home in Ottawa and Scarborough.
It just shows the type of ignorance that the board of directors have and the lack of compassion that they have for the people that are in here. They don't care.
Doug Ford, save our seniors before it's too late. Take over Woodbridge Vista.
Without even knowing, the province had given temporary control of Woodbridge Vista to a local hospital network. Families protested today. 17 residents have died of COVID-19 there, and 17 others were taken to hospital because the home admitted they couldn't meet their needs.
That's me. She's interrupting me. And all she did was interrupt. That's all she did.
Angela Zuccarelli wanted answers last night about her dad's care and said Dykeman's conduct during the meeting was bad enough.
But if she's shutting me down, imagine what they're doing to those people who are voiceless in there. Imagine, behind closed doors. It's one thing to appear one way in front of me, but the reality of what happens behind closed doors is the reality of why we're here.
But now hearing the class action, blood-sucking comments shook her.
You're the ones who are worried about the bottom line, which is why we are here today. We're not worried about a cent.
The union representing health workers there reports more than 24 staff were infected with the coronavirus. But Rep. Ken Evett says Dykeman's comments were the last straw.
Shame on her. She should resign from her position immediately.
In a statement to CBC Toronto, Sienna Senior Living said effective immediately, Joanne Dykeman is no longer with Sienna Senior Living. While she is deeply regretful of the comments she made yesterday evening, she also understands that they do not meet either her expectations nor those of Sienna Senior Living.
To say it was shocking would be an understatement from what we last saw of her.
Lucia Farcassi's mom died last Monday.
It's 85 degrees up there. It's unbelievably hot.
We were wilting in there, wilting. I can imagine her.
The night of her passing, Farcassi and her husband got to say goodbye.
We were singing to her, but then I realized, she needs to go be with my dad.
Her mom tested negative for COVID-19 3 times just days before her passing.
Neglect, dehydration, or a broken heart. That's what she passed of.
Yeah, broken heart for sure.
Chris Glover, CBC News, Toronto.
Let's check in with meteorologist Colette Kennedy now. So we've got a cool down on tap for the weekend, but first, tomorrow's humidity could cause some problems. Colette?
Yeah, there was a little humidity today. I mean, we had a humidex there in the low 30s, but really the dew points weren't that high. But you're right, Mike, we're going to find those dew points going up a little more, so it gets a bit stickier for tomorrow, and then everything kind of changes as a new air mass moves in for the weekend. So tomorrow afternoon, as this next one's starting to push towards us, some showers and some thunderstorms possible into the afternoon and evening hours. A little cooler, but when I say cooler, I just mean the temperature's going back closer to seasonal for our daytime highs, so it's actually going to be very comfortable. And then by next Tuesday, we're going to repeat this cycle and we're going to start hiking those numbers back up with highs in the upper 20s once again. So it's going to be a kind of brief cool down back to seasonal. Today, I got to point out to you, Toronto, you can see 30 degrees. In fact, in Markham today, 5 p.m., the hot spot in Ontario was Markham, but not only that, it was the hot spot in Ontario at 30.7 degrees. So some really steamy conditions around the GTA. It's a quiet night overnight tonight. There could be a little bit of fog closer to the lake, especially towards southwestern Ontario. There's that risk. It'll be patchy in nature. And then this is the front we'll be watching. So tomorrow, the early part of the day is going to be very nice. Morning especially, but part of the afternoon looks good. And then as we get into the late afternoon and evening hours, that's where we get into the risk of seeing some storminess coming in here. Could have some heavy downpours here, gusty winds, and there is the potential with these for a little bit of small hail, so know about that. You can see that coming through the Windsor area too into the evening hours. But then Saturday, things look good. It's into Saturday afternoon towards eastern Ontario where we could see some rain and again some embedded thunderstorms coming back through. Otherwise, looks pretty good for the GTA. Maybe on the extreme east end, you could get a little sprinkle in through there. Sunday looks good as well with sunshine and the temperatures a little cooler even than Saturday. I mentioned the patchy fog, and high teens are going to be your lows tonight for the Windsor area and beyond. Leamington 31 tomorrow, Windsor as well. How about feeling like 38 to 40 though with those humidex values? And overnight around the GTA, St. Catharines 17, Markham a cool down to 15 after that heat today. And tomorrow afternoon, a look at those numbers. Yeah, may we hit 30 degrees? Yeah, the potential's there, but at least the upper 20s coming back and feeling warmer than that, like we're in about the mid 30s. They're the cooler numbers for the weekend, really very comfortable. And boy, oh boy, it's looking like no active weather as we go through the period. There's that warm up though, Mike. Tuesday back up to 28 degrees.
All right, thanks, Colette.
You're welcome.
The weather is brought to you by Trane, the most reliable heating and cooling brand. We test, so it runs. Take advantage of special offers now. It's hard to stop a Trane.
Hard to believe. This time last year, the Toronto Raptors were in the NBA Finals. The series was tied a game apiece. They were heading into Game 3, which they'd eventually win. Basketball is just a memory now. We've had no sports since COVID-19 shut things down back in March. But today, the NBA announced a plan to return to action. Greg Ross has the details.
Here's Van Vliet, little misdirection, and one. Hearing the NBA Board of Governors had approved a format to resume play next month, the conversation amongst these basketball fans was no longer about if they return, but rather when they return.
I'm really excited that basketball is going to be back.
29 of 30 NBA teams voted in favor of a proposal that will see training camps open at the end of this month and play resume at the end of July, with all games being played at Walt Disney Resort in Florida.
It feels great. I mean, I feel it feels like, you feel a little bit normal.
Raptors play-by-play announcer Eric Smith says 22 teams have qualified to compete based on where they were in the standings when the season halted in March. It includes 16 teams that were in a playoff position and an additional 6 teams that were within 6 games of one of the final postseason berths.
Each team that is coming back is scheduled to play 8 regular season games.
The future is certainly looking brighter for the NBA, but the league still has one more hurdle to overcome before this is official.
Yeah, it opened up more teams, Greg, in the Western Conference than it did in the East, that 6-game kind of window. The Phoenix Suns in 13th place in the West are within 6 games.
The Raptors had the second best record in the Eastern Conference when play stopped, which leaves them in a very secure position if play resumes.
It has yet to be approved by the Players Association, and they're scheduled to meet on Friday.
These fans say they are just excited to see that basketball is potentially coming back, but they still have high hopes for their Raptors.
I think you should feel confident if you're a Raptor fan in saying that at the very least, you're going to be one of the top 3 seeds. But
they have a lot of defense. They have Pascal Siakam, and I think that they still can make it.
I mean, they're looking pretty good before all this happens.
Greg Ross, CBC News, Toronto.
Looking forward to that. Well, tomorrow on Q, a big name from the 90s is on. Grammy Award-winning singer Brandy speaks to Tom Power about her latest studio album and why she is reclaiming the term baby mama in one of her singles. You can listen to that tomorrow on CBC Radio 1. I'll see you back here tomorrow night at 11. Good night.